and I knew I was gonna kill her. To be walking up the stairs with a camera bag that belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so dramatic, so amazing, so violent.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's like midnight. Cheers to that. Welcome to True Crime and Wine. I'm not even gonna put Wednesdays anymore. I'm just gonna say welcome to True Crime and Wine because I just really can't be restricted to dates. I just can't. My life doesn't add up to a restricted date. So when I was in high school, we had this class for serial killers. And when I'm 32 now, sitting in my kitchen about to do this true crime video, I'm thinking to myself, why on earth was there a serial killer class when I was in high school? It wasn't like you did serial killer 1 and then when you got to sophomore year you would do 2, 3, 4. It was just a serial killer class, which was cool because I've always found the psyche and the fucked upness of these people to be so intriguing to me, because I just don't understand how people could walk this earth and do such heinous crimes. I'm not complaining about the class. I like the class. I just, now that I'm 32, I'm like, why did they have that class? What were they trying to tell us when we were in high school? Maybe the principal was a serial killer. She wanted everyone to take the class so like we would know she was a serial killer. Although there haven't been many female serial killers. But before I get into it, there's a reason I'm telling this story. When I took that class, everyone was assigned a serial killer for like a project. You'd go home, study it, come back to the class, and literally break down basically what you do in a true crime video. You just gotta do it in front of a class. And I got Ed Kemper, who is nicknamed the co-ed killer. And he's fucked up. The dude is not right in the head. But is like any serial killer really at the end of the day? No. So I was deciding who I was gonna do, and last night I was gonna film a completely different story about another little girl who was 11 years old. Her name is Mary Beth, and she's a serial killer. But as I was doing my research on Mary Beth, she doesn't even have a last name. I couldn't find her birthday. I know it's like a true story, but I just didn't like how there were so many pieces of the puzzle missing. And then I was in a bad mood, so I didn't end up filming, and it was just a bunch of right? Sorry, I'm switched up to scenery because everyone's sleeping and I'm in the kitchen. And there's like this monitor thing in the kitchen and I was just like, what the fuck is that? It distracted me. Sorry if the kitchen is a mess. Sorry if I'm a mess right now. I just didn't want to wake anybody up because it is midnight and Marcellus is sleeping. Gabby's probably sleeping. So here we are in the kitchen for True Crime and Wine. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I am going to react to this video. I haven't watched it yet, but it was on YouTube called Ed Kemper's 5 Scariest Interview Moments. And I'm just curious and I want to react to it before I do the video because I know everything about him since high school, so it'll be interesting to watch his interview. It's called 5 Scariest Ed Kemper Interviews Caught on Camera. That's
not vagina. Literally, the V word. When we talk like that about reproductive health, we're apologizing.
Edmund Kemper is one of the most notorious
Oh my god, this guy's voice.
Recently, there's been another resurgence in his popularity due to his depiction in the hit Netflix show Mindhunter. In today's video,
I don't like this guy's voice.
5 interviews of this highly intelligent and self-aware serial killer.
Number 5.
This first interview is from 1991, and he describes how he would go about his crimes. As with all of his interviews, he comes across as extremely self-aware, to the point where he almost seems to be trying to diagnose his own mental downfalls and quirks.
What the f is this guy saying?
Young people that I've been able to talk to honestly, and they've been knowing them well enough and friendly enough over enough years, share with me, because it was of real importance to me to know where I dove off the deep end. And they would admit that sometimes and they went off into happier orientations. They had a period where they went off into some real morbid or negative fascinations, but they grew out of it, quote unquote, grew out of it.
Quote unquote.
It stopped providing a service that they needed. It stopped filling a hole or a gap. Or, let's say an adult came along and started sharing something with them or showed them a new avenue of acting out that completely obliterated that need or vacated it, and they let it go. I didn't. The adult wasn't there. My mother was there, and she was there to beat me. She was there to humiliate me. She was there to use me as an example of how inferior men are.
Why does every serial killer wear glasses like that, bro? It's like weird to me. It's like...
In this interview, Edmund Kemper describes how he would secure his victims and try and gain control of certain situations, and how that progress would change the more experienced he became at killing. Most of the people he killed were young women at co-educational institutions, which gave him his nickname as a co-ed killer. Also, due to the fact he stood at 6'9", he could easily overpower his victims.
Wow, this guy's voice is so annoying, bro.
At the time, I wanted my case to look like random killings, unrelated. As you know, there was no real understanding of serial killing at the time, and when I told the police, they asked me how many people I thought I could have killed in the fashion that I did. Out of the approximately 1,000 individuals that got in my car over a 3-year period that I was out there, this being a hobby, side hobby, I was driving around, I love to drive, and picking up anybody who wanted to ride.
How are these aren't like scary moments, these are just moments, you know what I mean?
Kemper from 1984, where he was around 36 years of age. Here he discusses how he became almost cocky in his crimes, and goes in depth about how he would evade the police by avoiding techniques that he knew the police would use to capture him from the police TV shows he used to watch. Kemper had an IQ of 145, and throughout this interview,
I wonder what my IQ
how
is.
introspective he is, and how he would use his intelligence to stay out of the reach of the authorities.
I have no idea what this guy is saying. Can you guys understand
him?
him?
In the car, hidden, and this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides. This fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me.
Dude.
Ed Kemper's crimes were committed from between August 27th, 1964 and April 19th, 1973. And in this span of time, he had 10 victims and was criminally charged with 8 counts of murder. At the age of 15, Kemper even murdered his 2 grandparents just to see what it felt like. More recently though, Ed Kemper was denied parole in 2017.
He's 6'9", bro. Should have played basketball instead of becoming a serial killer. An idiot.
Being especially a California person, I've been listening to media conversation about you need this, you have to have that. You just can't live without this product or this item or this support system. I'd heard that all my life, and now I sat in a little concrete room, and I was told by people that were in authority that that's all I needed to stay alive. And what I found myself doing was facing myself for the first time in my life. And at that time, I was 24 years old.
What? That was so confusing. What the f was he talking about?
This final interview is an extremely interesting piece of footage where Ed opens up about his relationships with women and his mother, who he eventually killed and decapitated, and in his own words, humiliated. One of the interesting things about this particular interview is how he shows a sense of
hate
humor
the way this
whilst
guy
referencing
talks.
his horrific crimes.
These are the ones. Now, would you get in the car with this man? Huh?
No, the f I would not, actually, Ed. I would not get in the car with
State
you.
has made me much more credible as a human being. That I was losing a grasp on something that was too violent to keep inside forever. As I'm sitting there with a severed head in my hand, talking to it, or looking at it, and I'm about to go crazy, literally. I'm about to go completely flywheel loose and just fall apart. I say, wow, this is insane. And I told myself, no, it isn't. You're saying that. And that makes it not insane.
What? Okay. Well, I thought that was going to be, like, fun. Because the Jeffrey Dahmer interviews that I put in the true crime video I did of him were so f***ed up that I don't know how that was classified as the 5 scariest interviews. I bet if I get on YouTube and research for the next 15 hours, which I'm probably gonna do till 5 o'clock in the morning, I will find better clips to put without this true crime. And on that note, let's get started about Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer, also nicknamed the co-ed butcher, which I learned today. I didn't know that in high school, but I found that out today.
In 1972 and 1973, a series of murders shocked Northern California. College girls began to disappear while hitchhiking. 2 of the victims were picked up from the campus of the University of California at Santa Cruz. That's where Ed Kemper's mother was working as an administrative assistant.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing.
Ed Kemper was born on December 18th, 1948 in Burbank, California. He was the middle child of his parents, E.E. and Clarnell Kemper. Now, I don't know about those names, okay? But they're pretty terrible. I don't know what EE stands for. I'm gonna go ahead and assume maybe one of the E's is an Ed, because I know back in the day people would be like, I'm Ed, so I'm gonna name my son Ed. And I don't know why people do that. Like, when you meet someone, they're like, I am Michael Jr. the Third. Like, tell your family to stop. Stop. Anyways, the names are a little weird. Clarnell, very interesting. Never heard that before. And after this story, probably no one is ever going to name their daughter Clarnell ever. But he's a Sagittarius, and it's known that a lot of serial killers are Sagittarius. Now, I've never dated a Sagittarius. I've f***ed one. He was great in bed. And then never saw him ever again. So thank God, because he's probably a serial killer, and he probably would have killed me. So God bless. Thank you for the dick, and thank you so much for exiting right after. Thank you, Sagittarius. At a very young age, Ed was troubled, okay? The kid was f***ed up. If I'm a mom, if I'm a sister, if I'm a teacher, if I'm anybody looking in or experiencing it or witnessing it, I would be like, this kid is f***ed up. There is something seriously wrong with my brother if I was his sisters. He would like to play with his sisters a game of execution where he would be the victim and he would die in some weird way. For instance, he would make his sisters play this game called Gas Chamber, where he would make them blindfold him, lead him to a chair, where he would pretend to be in so much agony before he pretended to die. I'd be like, I don't want to play this. I want to like go jump in a pile of leaves in the backyard. You're freaking me out, and I'm telling mom on you. That's what I would do. And also I might have been a little petrified of him, so maybe I wouldn't have done that. But those are the type of games he would like to play with his sisters. He also would cut off the heads and the hands of all his sisters' dolls. And at a very, very young age, he had this weird fantasy about killing his mother. Which, I mean, if you're young and you're having those thoughts, you're probably like not off to a good start. It's not looking good for you, kid. And it's probably not looking good for anyone that knows you either. or anyone who doesn't know you, just not looking good. Having those thoughts when you're super young, like 10 years old, thinking about killing your mother, it's just not good. It's really not. It's not good. It's often said that serial killers' first victims are animals, and that's exactly what happened with Ed. The family pets, the cats, were Ed's first victims. The first cat he actually buried alive, and then he unburied it, cut off its head, and then left it on display in his bedroom. Their other cat, he cut to pieces with a machete knife, dismembered the entire body, left the pieces of the body in a closet in the family home until his mother found it. His mother said, "F this shit," and sent Ed to go live with his dad. His dad was like, "I'm good, like get the f out of here," and kicked Ed to the curb. He went back to his mom's house for a split second. She still couldn't handle him and sent him off to his grandparents' house. Now keep in mind, as he's bouncing around from his mom's house to his dad's house, back to his mom's house, then to his grandparents' house, as a young kid who's clearly f***ed up, he's also getting the message that you're unwanted, you're unloved, no one gives a f*** about you, nobody wants you around, you're so weird, we don't know what to do with you, I don't want to live with you, your dad doesn't want to live with you, you come back to me, I still don't want to deal with you, so I'm going to send you to your grandparents who probably don't want to be around you either. So this kid is not only screaming for a therapist, and also like I don't even know if a therapist could have helped Ed, but clearly is not receiving any type of compassion or love that you or I or anyone that comes from a loving family or home receives on a normal basis. And sometimes I often wonder how I would be if I didn't have the family I had or the love I received as a child growing up, because I really do feel that your upbringing defines how your life is gonna go, what direction you're gonna be in. Now, give or take, you can come from a really upbringing and change your whole world around, but with situations like Ed, where I don't know when or where or how his mother was like, f you, I wish I never had you, you're the devil. I don't know when that happened for Ed, but at some point it happens, and his life just was never the same. And I don't know if that was the switch that went off in Ed's head, or he was literally born a serial killer. That's what's so intriguing to me, is just you just don't know. Were you born this way? Did your upbringing make you this way? What made Ed become a serial killer? And we'll just like never know, because even as many interviews as he did and as many doctors as he's seen, I don't think anyone will get the answer. Ed hated living on his grandparents' farm. But his grandfather actually gave him a rifle. Ed was learning how to shoot. But his grandparents eventually took his rifle away because he ended up killing tons of birds, tons of small animals, and his grandparents had just about enough of his random killing. And that infuriated Ed, made him f***ing pissed, made him mad as hell. Ed also had a deep-rooted hate for his grandmother, who reminded him of his mother. He thought that his grandmother was just like his mom in the sense that she liked to make men feel like they were absolutely nothing, that she had the balls and the man didn't. Ed sounds like a little pussy ass bitch, but if you ask me, I think it's sexy when women have balls and tell men how things are gonna go and when they're gonna go that way, but that's just me. But he hated his grandmother for that. His grandmother reminded him of his mother, and he had just about enough of his Nana. So on August 27th, 1964, Ed and his grandma had an argument. So Ed grabbed his rifle, went into the kitchen where his grandmother was, and shot her and killed her. When his grandfather came home, because his grandfather was out, he went outside with his gun, shot his grandfather to death right next to his car, and then hid the body. After he killed his grandparents, Ed called his mother and told him what happened. Ed's mom urged him to call the police and told him to tell the police what happened. So Ed called the police, and the police showed up. And he would later admit that he killed his grandmother because he wanted to know what it felt like to shoot Nana. He also admitted that he killed his grandfather because he didn't want his grandfather to be mad at him for killing his grandmother. So instead of risking his grandfather freaking the out on him, he decided to kill him instead. Great logic, Ed. Great logic. When Ed committed his grandparents' murder, he was only 15 at the time. He was handed over to the California Youth Authority. When he got there, he underwent a variety of tests, including an IQ test where it was proved that he was extremely intelligent. His IQ was 145. I don't really know what the fuck that means, and I also wonder what my IQ is, but I'm gonna go ahead and assume that means he's really, 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 really intelligent, because most serial killers are really smart. They also determined that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. So because Ed was really smart, during his 5-year stay at the California Youth Authority, he convinced everyone that he was rehabilitated, a cured youth, a cured young man. And at the age of 21, in 1969, even though it was against his doctor's advice to release him back to his mother, he was released back into his mother's authority. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if I was his mom and I knew he killed his 2 grandparents, I would say, I'm all f***ing set. I don't want my son to ever know where I am. I'd move cities, I'd move towns, I'd get the f*** out of Dodge, and I would probably change my name and maybe go into a witness protection program, I don't know, but I would never agree to have my son come back into my life after he killed his grandparents. I'd be done, and I'd be petrified as well. But his mom agreed to it, and he went back into his mother's custody at the age of 21. At this point, his mother had relocated to Santa Cruz and was working at a college as an administrator. Ed became a giant. He was 6'9", close to 300 pounds, just a big ass motherfucking dude. Now, he applied to be a state trooper, and obviously it didn't work out for him. He got rejected because of his size. I don't know if it's because 6'9" is too big to be a state trooper, but he got rejected. But more importantly, I guess my question is, how the fuck does someone who kills his grandparents even have an opportunity to apply to be a state trooper? Yo, I shot both my grandparents to death, but let me apply to be a fucking state trooper and pull people over and legally carry weapons. Can someone explain that to me? Is that like something that was cool back in the 60s, 70s? Because that shit don't make no sense to me. That you could fucking murder 2 people and then apply to be a state trooper. Granted, he got denied because of his size. But what if his size wasn't big? What if Ed was a normal sized dude? Would he then still be rejected or not? He eventually got employment with the Department of Transportation in 1971. He couldn't stand living with his mother, so he moved to Alameda, which is by San Francisco. The same year Ed got a job for the Department of Transportation, he got hit by a car while on his motorcycle. His arm was seriously injured, and he sued the driver of the vehicle and won $15,000 in a settlement. Now, $15,000 now is absolutely nothing, really. I mean, it's a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. But back in the day, $15,000 was like, cha-ching, I'm rich, you know? So Ed just hit the lotto, basically. After his accident, Ed was unable to work, but he bought a new car with his settlement money. At this time, he started noticing that there was a lot of females that were hitchhiking, because I guess hitchhiking was cool back in the day. I don't know how anyone, like, even with all these serial killer true crimes I'm doing, last time it was Dean Coral, the Candyman, who used to pick up little boys that were walking home from school at like 13, 14. First of all, I'm beep beep, I'm in the you're not even taking the bus. I'm picking you up from school. It's not even happening. So back in the day, I feel like shit was different because no woman on the face of the planet should ever hitchhike. Ever. No man, no woman, no one ever should hitchhike. So obviously it was different back in the day. Completely different. So since he wasn't working, his mind was moving towards his other pursuits. And when I say other pursuits, I mean his disgusting, murderous fantasies. So he went to a store and he bought what he might need to complete one of these fantasies. He bought a gun, he bought, and I don't know how he bought a gun because his record wasn't expunged. He's still a murderer, but he bought a gun, he bought a knife, and he bought some handcuffs. Could have bought some other shit, but that's the only stuff I read online. At first, Ed would just pick up female hitchhikers, give them rides, and then let them go. He wanted to learn how to conversate with females during these rides, how to make them feel comfortable, how to make them feel at ease, what to say, what not to say. So for a while, thank God these women got away, but for a while, he was only picking them up to let them go.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area, even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady. I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women, and I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. At first there wasn't a gun. I'm driving along. We go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, where I could act out, and I say, no, I can't. And then a gun is in the car, hidden. And this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides, this fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me. It was like drugs. It was like alcohol. A little isn't enough. At first it is. And as you adjust to that, psychologically and physically, you take more and more and more. It's the same process. So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out, something has to happen. It was going to happen. I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun that got us all.
On May 7th, 1972, Ed picked up two co-eds, and I'm sorry if I'm going to say their name incorrectly, you guys know I'm not the best with names, Mary Ann Pesch and Anita Lucchesi, not far from Stanford University. Ed drove them to an isolated spot, pulled out his 9mm gun, handcuffed Mary Ann before throwing Anita into the trunk by gunpoint. I can't even imagine what these girls were thinking or feeling, but that's gotta be one of the scariest moments for anyone. I can't even imagine. Even when I watch it in movies and you see the shit go down in movies, you're like, yo, this is fucked up. But when it's real life and it's actually like, this happened. He did this to these women. It is fucked up. Completely fucked up. Ed took a plastic bag, wrapped it around Mary Ann's head, then took a cord and started strangling her. And as she fought for her life, he stabbed her a bunch of times before slitting her throat. After he was done with Mary Ann, he went to the trunk to take care of Anita. Anita fought like f***ing hell to get away from Ed and get the fuck out of the trunk. I think there was an interview with Ed where he was explaining that he's never had someone fight that hard, and it fascinated him, and he was interested in how she got even when he was stabbing her and she was looking at her bones sticking out of her skin, she was still fighting like hell to get out of the trunk. Eventually she slowed down and she succumbed to his injuries, and when she was finally dead, he threw the knife into the trunk with the bodies and drove home. At this point, Ed had a roommate, but his roommate was away, so when he drove home, he carried the bodies up into his house covered in blankets. He then dismembered the bodies. He then took some Polaroid photographs. He stuffed the remains into garbage bags and drove to the mountains where he buried them. However, he did keep their heads for a while before he eventually tossed them into a ravine. Mary Ann's head was eventually discovered a couple months later. She was identified by dental records, but investigators had zero clue what happened or who did it. Until this day, Anita's body and remains have never been found.
On one occasion, Kemper picked up two roommates in Berkeley.
In that first killing, in May of '72, when that gun was pulled out, I launched it out. I had it under my leg, out of sight, parallel to my leg in the seat. It was something that had been thought out in fantasy, acted out, felt out hundreds of times before it ever happened.
Kemper drove them at gunpoint to a secluded area near a park. He took one of them into the woods, leaving the second girl tied in the car.
I'd just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate, stabbing her. And I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell on me. Everybody's gonna get me. She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? And she pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that? I couldn't deal with telling her that. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on. It knocked her right up into the lid of the car, but it didn't pierce the clothing. So it wasn't that swell a knife anyway. I went out and bought a pawn shop, huge knife. And I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk. I just killed a young woman. I slammed down the lid of the trunk. She isn't dead, she's dying. And I panicked. I thought, I just locked the car keys in because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk. I'm kicking on the trunk lid and yanking on it. Oh no, I don't believe this. I started to run and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there. I stopped. I said, stop and think. I collected my wits. Check all your pockets. I picked the gun up. I stuck it back in my pants, now remembering I had one. I checked all my pockets, and there's the keys in the back pocket. I never put them in my back pocket.
Everyone makes mistakes, and that's what we have to hope for. The more mistakes they make, the better their chances.
I thought I was pretty slick, and went and tripped all over myself. That first 2 murders, the first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted, and I wasn't. Because 3 different individuals or 3 different groups of people got scared and minded their own business and looked the other way.
Some of the people who are committing murders, even as we speak, if they're doing it by themselves and they tell no one about it, they could go on undetected until they decided to stop. And the police wouldn't catch them unless we just happened to roll up on them while they were doing it.
Even after police warnings against hitchhiking and an increased bus schedule on the campus, Kemper had no trouble picking up hitchhikers.
Ed took a break from killing for a couple of months because he was trying to get his mother's backing to try to get his record expunged for killing his grandparents. Can you even imagine? How his mom got bamboozled into helping this dude do anything is beyond me, but whatever. His hearing was scheduled for September 15th, 1972. But a day before his hearing, September 14th, 1972, Ed couldn't help himself and committed another murder. He was driving and he offered a ride to a 15-year-old Aku. I'm so sorry if I'm saying her name incorrectly. You guys know I'm terrible. I'm always going to say I'm terrible at names, but I'm sorry if I'm saying the name incorrectly. He drove her out into the mountains, overpowered her, which was easy because the motherfucker was 6'9", 300 pounds. Like what female on the face of the planet would be able to fight off anyone that big? He eventually killed her. And then after he was killed, he dismembered the body and then had sex with it again. He dumped the body in the isolated area, but kept the head in his trunk. The next day when he went to his hearing, the head of his victim was still in his trunk. So while he was in his hearing, the psychiatrists were talking about how impressed they were by Ed's rehabilitation and how great he has become throughout the years. Meanwhile, there's a head in his trunk. So they all voted and agreed to have his record expunged. So eventually his settlement money ran out, he's starting to be broke, and he has to move back in with his mom. And now, if I'm his mom, I'm sorry, you're never living with me, I never want to see you again. I've already said this, I'm going to say it 1,000 times. What is this woman doing? I guess I don't understand it. I don't know if you guys understand it. Something's going on, yo. Do you guys see this? I'm gonna have to finish this in the morning because I'm not kidding. For like 20 minutes, I've been hearing like tiptoeing, like somebody walking, and I'm covered in goosebumps. Like, look at that. You guys, look at that. I'm out. I'll finish this in the morning. Hey guys, I just switched locations because I don't know what the that was downstairs, but it was like this rush of like freezing cold air, even though the heat is on, and I had such bad goosebumps that the hairs on my arms were sticking straight up like I got electrocuted. And I just got so petrified. But then I said, fuck that shit. Y'all have no power over me. I'm more powerful than you. No, but for real, it was petrifying. So I moved upstairs, but I don't have that. Oh my God, and I have no memory space. My memory cards are downstairs. And maybe this is just a sign that I've got to finish this in the morning. Because... Hi everyone. I know it doesn't look like this because I threw the same shirt on, but my makeup is a little different. So is my lip gloss, and it is the next morning. I don't know what was going on last night, but there was some paranormal activity going on around me, and I got petrified and I went to bed. So I am continuing this true crime in the morning, the day of upload. So I'm gonna finish filming, spend who knows how much time editing it, and put it up tonight. And also, before I continue on this glorious, horrific story, that is not a Christmas tree. The tree is black and it has orange lights. I know it doesn't really look like it. Hi baby, there's a big boy, yes, there's a big boy. But it's supposed to be a Halloween tree, not a Christmas tree. I keep getting comments like, you already have your Christmas tree up? I'm like, guys, do you think that's what my Christmas tree would look like if I did have it up? No, it's a Halloween tree, okay? All right, now let's get back into the story about Ed Kemper, the co-ed killer. So this fact is kind of weird. So this psychiatric board agreed to expunge his record. So November, his hearing was in September, and November his record was finally expunged. And he could officially buy a gun. But what's confusing to me is that he's had tons of guns all along. So was he buying them illegally? Was he buying them on the black market? If he's now just able to buy guns, how was he buying guns before? I guess it's the same way where anyone buys guns. I guess you can always figure out a way to get a gun, which is kind of scary in itself. But besides the point, his record was expunged, and he was finally officially ready and able to walk into a store and buy a gun without people being like, well, sir, you killed 2 people and we can't give you this gun. Because now his record is as if he never killed anyone. Meanwhile, he's going around killing a bunch of innocent co-eds. So on January 8th, 1973, he bought a gun. He already had guns, but he bought a new gun. And the following day, January 9th, 1973, he picked up Cindy Shaw, who was 18 years old and a teacher in training. He drove Cindy to an isolated location somewhere in the mountains or the hills. He shot her to death, threw her body into the trunk. His mom was out, so he brought the body back to his mom's crib, brought it upstairs, had sex with the dead corpse, then put it in the bathtub before dissecting it. He even removed the bullets from her body so those couldn't be traced. He stuck her body parts, everything but her head, into garbage bags, drove to a cliff, and threw the bag of body parts into the ocean. He kept the head of Cindy in his closet in a box for quite some time. A few days after he threw Cindy's body parts into the ocean, they washed ashore and they were discovered. Once Ed got word of this, whether the news or chit-chat at the bar that he frequently went to, he decided it was time to get rid of the head. So he buried Cindy's head in the backyard facing his mother's bedroom window. He would later tell authorities that he did that because his mother always liked when people looked up to her. Fucking psychopath.
But how are you able to, in 1 minute, have someone's head in your hands and very shortly thereafter?
Living through a fantasy, however that would relate to that severed head. And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away and answer the door. And the landlady would be there, and we'd discuss it.
Discuss what?
Reality. Her reality, not mine. Some people go crazy at that point. I felt it. It was one hell of a tweak. I mean, to just flip out and not know where I was. To be walking up the stairs with a camera bag that belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment, past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two was so dramatic, so amazing, so violent, that really, I could feel the wheels squeaking inside. That was really pulling on it. And I imagine at that point some people break. But I didn't literally go insane. I didn't get lost.
4 weeks after he killed Cindy Shaw, Him and his mother got into a huge fight. His mom was like, please enroll into college, get a degree, do something with your life. You know how mothers do. My mom has talked her shit about where my life has gone and what I could have been doing. Like, you would have been a great lawyer. Okay, Mom, I know I would. Let's let it go now. I'm not a lawyer. So they were getting in a typical mother-son, mother-child, whatever type of fight, except theirs was probably really vile and really toxic. So he storms out. He gets in his car and he heads down to Santa Cruz. As he's cruising, he ends up at the college that his mother actually worked at. And he picked up a hitchhiker named Rosalind Thorpe, who was 23 years old. Ed recalls the night being rainy and wet, and as he was driving with Rosalind, he stopped and picked up another student whose name was Alice Liu. She was 21 years old and she was actually waving a car down for a ride, which is just like so mind-baffling to me because I just can't get over the fact that hitchhiking was like actually a thing back in the day and people just did it and got into cars with strangers, because I don't even care what generation it is. I feel like your parents from 2000 BC to 2020 should tell their kids don't talk to strangers, and damn sure don't get into a car with a stranger. Like, especially a big ass grown ass 6'9", 300-pound man. It's just like, it's so weird to me. It is so weird to me. But that's besides the point, because it was a thing back in the day, and these two ladies probably, especially Alice, who got in the car second, probably felt safe enough because there was another female in the passenger seat. Needless to say, neither one of them were safe at all. As they were driving down to Santa Cruz, he turned to Rosalind, who was in the passenger seat, and shot her. Then he turned to Alice, who was sitting in the back seat, and shot her as well. He then turned his car down a deserted road. I don't know if it was a dead end or just a quiet street, but he turned down a street where no one would see him or bother him. He got out, he threw the bodies in the trunk, and then he headed back to his mom's house. When he gets back to his mom's house, she's home. He opens the trunk right in the middle of the street and starts decapitating the dead bodies that are in his trunk right there in the open on the street. I don't know how his mom didn't fucking catch it. I don't know how a neighbor sipping coffee looking out the window didn't catch it. I don't know how no one drove down his street to see a 6'9" man cutting somebody's fucking head off in a trunk. It doesn't make goddamn sense to me. It's almost like he wanted to get caught. Like, hello? Does anybody see me doing this right now? Anybody? Nobody? Hello? I'm literally cutting off someone's head in the middle of the street in front of my mom's house. My mom's house. Yep, no one saw him. So then he brought the bodies upstairs. How? I don't know. His mom must have been in like a slur or intoxicated with vodka, because even if I'm drunk, I'm probably going to be noticing some shit. I actually would probably be noticing more shit while I was drunk than when I was sober. TBH, to be honest. But whatever, he gets the bodies upstairs. The next day, he has sex with Alice's corpse. I don't know why he didn't have sex with Rosalind, or maybe he did, but every article I read said he only had sex with Alice's. After he was done dismembering them and putting the body parts into garbage bags, he drives it to a cannon and he gets rid of the pieces all over the cannon. This time he does not keep their heads. He actually takes their heads and their hands and he throws them off a cliff. Why? I don't know. He was a paranoid schizophrenic. He tricked the people into thinking he was rehabilitated when he first was 21 and got out, and then again when he was getting his record expunged. But he was still paranoid and he was still a schizophrenic. So I don't know what thoughts were going through his head. I don't know if he's like, oh my god, I gotta get rid of these bodies. I'm gonna get caught. Like, someone's gonna catch me. Or maybe deep down inside he wanted to get caught, because what person cuts off somebody's head while the body is in the trunk in an open street? And how no one saw him is beyond me.
Ironically, one warning advised riding only in cars with university stickers. Kemper's car had such a sticker.
My mother worked at the campus and I had an A sticker on my car, an obvious access day or night to the campus. I was picking up some very lovely young women. You know what we were talking about as we're driving around? Almost as often as not, this guy that's going around doing this stuff. And the second they started talking that, they didn't realize it, but they were getting a free ride. I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, I swear. You know, but they'd be telling me what all about this guy, and they're comparing notes and speculating on what he looks like, how he carries himself, why he's doing this stuff, telling me about it.
So how come they get in a car with somebody at that time?
She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like it. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable. I started flaunting that invisibility, severing a human head, 2 of them, at night in front of my mother's residence, with her at home, my neighbors at home upstairs, their picture window open, the curtains open, 11 o'clock at night, the lights are on. All they have to do is walk by, look out, and I've had it.
Why did you keep the heads? Why did you cut them off, and why did you keep them?
Something out of my childhood. I could put it on an incident. I mean, my father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner. You know, we could say it was something that simple. I don't think it was. Now, my dad heads out back with a hatchet. I got on my bike and I tried to stop it. I remember that. I got on the bike, rode around the block. I was crying. I haven't talked about that for a lot of years. I'm sure that may have implemented something, that may have gotten something rolling, but along fantasy lines. But it took a lot of years of development along those lines to really get off.
2 weeks after Ed killed and dumped the bodies of Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liu, the bodies were discovered, and then they were identified. They linked these 2 murders with the murders of Cindy Shaw and actually one other college student who ended up not being a victim of Ed's. So the hunt is on. The cops know there is somebody out here murdering these women. Mind you, they haven't even linked him to the rest of the girls he's already killed. But these 3 women were murdered by the same person. They're thinking there's a 4th, but that 4th victim ended up not being Ed's. So now they got their 3 victims linked. They know they have a killer. Back in the day, remember when Ed was a serial killer, there wasn't a term called serial killer. So they just know that there's somebody out there that has killed 3 people. They don't know if it's random. They don't know if it's put together. Authorities don't even know what a serial killer is, how a serial killer mind works, nothing. So the hunt is on for somebody. They don't know who, but it's on for the co-ed killer, the co-ed butcher. Here's a fun fact. At the same time Ed was coined the co-ed killer and was terrorizing the streets of Santa Cruz, picking up hitchhikers and butchering them to death, there was also 2 active serial killers in the area. John Linley Frazier and Herbert Mullins. I might just have to do their true crimes next because I don't really know their specific stories. It's not like really hitting a bell. But at the same exact time Ed was being a serial killer, there was 2 other serial killers on the loose. So we got 3 serial killers in the same goddamn area killing everybody. And so while all this is happening, we got Ed killing, we got John killing, we got Herbert killing. All of them are serial killers. No one even knows what a serial killer is yet. But Santa Cruz earned the nickname Murder Capital of the World. Can you imagine 3 serial killers at the same exact time committing 3 completely different crimes, all terrorizing an entire area at the same time? Can you guys even imagine? Let's say I'm in Boston right now, so can you imagine 3 serial killers at once on the streets of Boston? Or at once on the streets of Hollywood? That's insane. That's so much death. That's so much anger and crime and horror. I didn't even know this. I did this research in high school and I didn't even know this. So this is something I'm finding out. So now I'm just gonna have to do these dudes next because they were killing at the same time as Ed. Now I gotta see what y'all, they didn't even know about each other. Imagine if they knew about each other, like who's a better killer? Who's gonna get caught first? Imagine they all sat at the bar Ed hung out with, like, so who'd you kill today? Oh, you know, just this chick I picked up at a college campus. What about you? Well, I did this. Well, I did that. Well, I'm not gonna get caught. Well, I'm not gonna get caught. Can you even imagine 3 psychopaths in the same city and they don't even know about each other? And cops don't even know what to call them because they didn't even know what serial killers were back then. So that's a fun fact. That fact actually blew my mind, if you can't tell. I'm blown away by it, actually. And it's so weird because when I lived in San Jose, I went to Santa Cruz a bunch of times and I didn't even know this. And it's weird because I did do Ed Kemper in college, but I never remembered where he lived or what area he was from. And now I'm 32 years old and I think about the stupid I did when I was younger, like get on a Greyhound bus for 4 days and go all the way to San Jose and talk to random strangers. How many times I set myself up to be a victim, and I just get chills about it. And then I think of all the times I went to Santa Cruz by myself, or just did really dumb that I would never do now. And after doing these true crime YouTubes, things I would never advise any female to do. But it's just funny, because I've been there a bunch of times, and now anytime I think of Santa Cruz, I'm gonna think murder capital of the world, and I'm never gonna go again. Literally never going again. So here's the thing. Ed hated women. Didn't matter who they were, what they did, where they were going, how they dressed, how they spoke. It didn't matter. He hated women because he saw every woman as an extension of his mother and his grandmother, probably, because he hated both his mother and his grandmother. But most importantly, his mother. But although he hated women and he was a brutal psychopath slash murderer slash butcher, he was disgusted with himself. He knew that the murders needed to stop. He knew that he could no longer continue. I don't know if whatever void he was trying to fill was no longer being filled, but in his up mind and head, he knew the only way that the murders would stop and he would stop is if he killed his mother. So a week before he killed his mom, he decided to see if he can control his urges. So he picked up 2 hitchhikers. They said they needed to go somewhere, and he was thinking in his mind, I'm driving them in the opposite direction. How easy it would be for me to just kill them, bring them to their death. But he ended up bringing them exactly where he needed to go, and he let them go. They had no idea he was a serial killer. They had no idea he had killed before. They just thought it was some nice guy that gave him a ride. At that very moment is when Ed realized, I need to stop, or more girls, like 2 girls I just dropped off and let go, are gonna die. So I have to kill my mother. So for a whole week, Ed knew he was going to kill his mom.
It was springtime. It was April. And for 2 months I hadn't killed. And I said, it's not going to happen to any more girls. It's got to stay between me and my mother. And it's got to, I can't get away from her. We're still fighting. She's still belittling me. I'm like a puppet on a string, and I entertain her. She knows all my buttons, and I dance like a puppet with that pain. And it had even gotten physical, to where I had physically grabbed her and thrown her onto her bed, trying to emphasize a point that I was threatening to kill her. So here I pick up these 2 young ladies in Berkeley on Ashby Avenue. One has flowers in her hand, petite little dolls. They're in granny dresses, and they're hitchhiking, a couple of real experts. I want to see how together I am, if I can resist this temptation.
You going to Walnut Creek? Great.
And they get in my car. They want to go one way. I know they need to go the other. If they go the way they're insisting on, we're headed right back out to where the first 2 co-eds were murdered. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, all I got to do is relax, and they'll take me to their death. I've got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted. As gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college.
Thanks a lot.
That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died, I was going to kill her.
Ed's mom comes home from a party. She's super drunk. She's in her room. She's reading a book. Ed walks into the room, and I guess his mom said something like, so what, you want to sit up and talk all night? And in an interview, he gets choked up. He's like, no, I told her to go to bed, good night, knowing I was going to kill her, knowing I was going to murder her. So around 5:15 in the morning on April 5th, 1973, Ed went into the kitchen, got a hammer, went into his mom's room, struck her once in the head, slit her throat, and then decapitated her. He cut out her vocal cords and stuck the vocal cords down the garbage disposal, and they actually spat back out. In one interview, Ed said, even though I put her vocal cords down a garbage disposal, I could still hear her yelling at me. So his fucked up mentality is really all rooted in his weird, bizarre relationship with his mother.
My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. And I watched the alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre. She had terrible pain from her life, earlier life, her upbringing, a failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure. I hate to distill it down into such, into one-word realities like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that, came out, I walked up to her bed, she's laying there reading a paperback, as many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. I looked at her, I said, "No." I said, "Good night." And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. Because I'm not a lizard, I'm not from under a rock. I came out of her vagina. See? I came out of my mother. And in a rage, I went right back in. For 7 years, she said, I haven't had sex with a man because of you, my murderous son. This is one of our arguments. I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. It's there, you know? A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? "I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk." God, I wish I had.
Your grandmother and her daughter-in-law, your mother, were two women very important in your life, and you killed them both. Could you say what they were like that led them to the same fate?
Same thing that kept them from ever being friends. They were both aggressive, matriarchal women. They'd been the daughters of strong matriarchal women. I still loved my mother, and it's hard for somebody to comprehend that you murder your mother through love. It isn't a rational process. It's a very painful process. It isn't rational, and I've got to still live with that.
Why did you wind up giving yourself up?
It had to stop. It had to stop. Once my mother was dead, there was almost a cathartic process at that point. I got physically ill right then, when she died, when I murdered her. And once she was dead, there was no way I could back out. I had backed down from giving up 1,000 times. You know, I used to get drunk and go sit out in front of the sheriff's department in a parking lot across the street on one of those little concrete parking berms, and I just sit there and say, "No, I still can't." The clanging doors, I could still hear them. No, because it'll never open again. You know, so I rationalized that to give up would be insane. To give up would be crazy. I'd be giving away my freedom, and I don't need to. But I look back on that and wish I had earlier, when I was saying those things to myself. The people who were later dead wouldn't be. The regret that came later would have not had to be.
When Ed's mom was still alive, she would blame a constant fight her and Ed had was how she hasn't had a man, she hasn't had sex in years, because no one wanted to date or have sex with someone who has a murderous son. So when he killed her and decapitated her head, he had sex with his mother's head, which is like the most, all of this is pretty fucking disgusting, but that is like probably the most disgusting aspect of the story. Disgusting. And then when he'd be done taking advantage of his mother's dead body, he would put it on the mantle for display, or he'd throw darts at her head. use it as a dartboard. Eventually, he cleaned up the house as much as he could, put her remains in a bag, and put the remains in the closet. He got in his car and he was driving around aimlessly having paranoid thoughts like, oh my god, I just killed my mom, what am I gonna do, the cops are gonna know it's me. And then he had this brilliant idea that if there was another person dead in the house, maybe the cops would be less likely to look at Ed for committing the murders. I'm sorry, Ed, probably not. So he gets home, he calls his mom's friend Sally Hackett and says, hey, I'm throwing a surprise Easter dinner for Ma. Can you come? She says yeah. So she's coming over for Easter dinner. She comes over to Ed's house. She sits down at the table and her last words were, let's sit, I'm dead, meaning I'm tired. Ed strangled her to death. I think he started with his hands and then used a scarf. When he was done killing Sally, he went to the jury room, he had a drink, then he went back to his house, cut off her head, put her body in the bed, took advantage of the body in the bed, and then Ed went to sleep. The next morning he wakes up, it's Easter morning, he starts freaking out. He's like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? Like, I'm gonna get caught, this is the end of the road for me, like what the fuck, I'm done. I'm screwed, I'm so screwed, I'm so screwed. And so he gets in his car and he starts driving east. And he gets all the way to Pueblo, Colorado. I'm sorry if I'm saying that incorrectly. And when he gets there, he gets on a payphone and he calls the Santa Cruz Police Department and he confesses to killing his mother and to all the murders. And no one believes him at first. Not a single person. And then he keeps calling and he keeps confessing and he keeps calling and he keeps confessing. And so finally they're like, okay, like this guy has to be telling the truth. So they end up arresting him. While Ed got arrested for 8 counts of murder, he already killed his grandparents, so he really killed 10 people in total, but his record was expunged. So he got arrested on 8 counts of murder. At his trial, he said this when he asked about his motive for killing. He said, alive, they were distant, not sharing with me. Talking about the women. I was trying to establish a relationship. When they were being killed, there wasn't anything going on in my mind except that they were going to be mine. That was the only way they could be mine. I had their spirits. I still have them. Which is kind of weird because if you really think about Jeffrey Dahmer, he kind of said the same thing. He's like, I killed my victims and I would keep their body parts so a piece of them would always stay with me. And Ed's saying, well, their spirits are always going to be with me. That's the only way I can have them. So I don't know if it's the isolation or whatever makes a serial killer, but they all kinds of have the same mindset of when they kill their victims are now a part of them and are never going to leave. It's so weird and so up. I hope everyone stopped hitchhiking after this. I really do, but they probably didn't. Ed got convicted of the 8 counts of murder, and when he was asked, what do you think is suitable punishment? He responded by saying death by torture, which would have been the easy way out for Ed because he's been acting out an agonizing, painful death since he was a child. At this time, California did not have the death penalty, so he did not get his wish. He did not get death by torture. Instead, he was to serve consecutive life sentences and spend the rest of his life in prison, which he still is there, and I would love, love, love to figure out how I can go interview him. Obviously, like with massive security so he doesn't strangle me to death or whatever, but I would love, 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 love to interview him. I wonder if I can make that happen. Just like have like and like record it. Ask him if I can fucking record it and put it on my Wave channel. I need to figure out how I can do that. So while Ed was in jail, he underwent tons of interviews with news stations, psychiatrists. His interviews even helped people coin the phrase serial killer and have helped detectives and agents and whoever try to understand the psyche of a serial killer or what makes a serial killer, even though to this day and till the end of time I don't think anyone will be able to be like, this is what makes a serial killer and this is how a serial killer became a serial killer. But his interviews while in jail helped basically define serial killers. Ed's f***ed up. Ed's f***ed up. And it's weird that people like him are probably still like wandering the streets. And in one interview, I don't know if I can find it, he said, I could have committed so much more crimes and no one would have stopped me. I'm living in this society and I'm killing people in this society and no one even has a clue. It was kind of like chilling because we really don't have a clue. We don't know what our neighbors are doing or what our neighbors' children are doing or whatever. Everyone could be a suspect. Anyone could be a serial killer. I mean, I think technology and DNA and all that is a little bit more advanced than it was in the 70s, but still creepy nonetheless. So I'm probably gonna have to do John next, or Herbert. Is that his name? Whatever those two serial killers were that I just named. I'm probably gonna have to do them next. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this week's true crime video. Thank you for your patience. We'll be back next week, maybe with one of those serial killers that I named earlier in this video that were killing at the same exact time as Ed, which I didn't have a clue even happened. But I hope you liked this video. Give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. But as I always say, if you're giving it a thumbs down, you probably shouldn't be on this channel. But if you are going to be here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, but also hit the bell, because if you don't hit the bell, you will not get notifications. And if you don't get notifications, you will not know when I post. Follow me on Instagram, XXO Danielle, Swallow Podcast, The Official Victor Twins, Little Caesar the Frenchie. TikTok is The Official Victor Twins and XXO Danielle. Please ride the wave with us. Our exclusive content will be on there. Anything that we believe is going to be demonetized on YouTube will only be on our Wave channel, not on YouTube anymore. That link is in the description box. Ride the wave / the Victor Twins post. And yeah, that's it. Subscribe to my OnlyFans, XXO Danielle. I just got every platform. Bigo now, XXO Danielle. Follow me everywhere, bitches. Jump on this Danny train. Jump on it. Get on it. Jump on it. Jump on it. Is that how the song goes? Probably not, no. Anyways, I love you guys to the moon and back. Be safe, be smart, have your eyes open. Don't get into cars with strangers. Don't talk to strangers. Don't be walking on the side of the road by yourself. It's a dangerous, dangerous world out there, and there's motherfuckers like Ed Kemper waiting to release their inner fucking demon and on anyone they have the chance to, because just because a serial killer hasn't been caught in a while don't mean there ain't no serial killers, and that's on period, okay? Love you. Bye.